Hello, everyone. Sanjoy Dutta here at my favorite presentation of the year. You've seen many good RIV presentations throughout the year from many of my colleagues in research and in policy. And I'm here, I have the privilege of summarizing the advances at the end of the year here in May. In the month of May. And one of the things, each year I probably say the same thing, but I'm amazed each year as it passes on that this year was amazing. And I am saying that from the bottom of my heart because last year we had amazing advances, but this year it seems to top it off. And I'm hoping the following year will top off what we're doing this year. And that's the way progress has been here. There's a lot to cover, but I will not be able to get into all the advances. My colleague Brian Herrick has generously picked what are truly top advances. This is like doing the top 10 list. So I'll go over them. Hopefully you will be as excited as I am here. And I look forward to question and answer next week from all of you. So I don't need to tell this crowd about our laser focused mission about accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to change the course of the disease and certainly to treat the people that have T1D. Adults, younger people, older adults, men, women, everyone here. And our vision about a world without T1D, where we can prevent this disease totally from happening in the next generations. And that has not been changed. We are just doubling down on this as much as we can here. I also don't need to remind this crowd here that we work the pipeline. You'll see different versions of the pipeline, but the bottom line is from ideation, from an idea, a light bulb going off in the head of a scientist, in the brain of a scientist, all the way into people with diabetes doing better, and how these therapies advance through progressive validation at each of the stage, and they reach an inflection point, and then they go through approval, important for coverage, and the buck doesn't stop there. Clinicians need to prescribe it, patients need to use it, and actually benefit from him. And this cycle is a vicious cycle, and it's cyclical, it's not linear. We show it in a linear fashion here, but each step of the way informs not only the forward-looking step in the pipeline, but also informs the previous step and helps us enhance discovery research, enhance clinical development or translational development, enhance healthcare coverage, so on and so forth here. So again, we work the pipeline. We've got internal bench strength at each of these chevrons shown here to ensure that we have as efficient a process as possible here. Now let's dive into actual progress here. Before that, the priorities here. As again, for this crowd here, we have mentioned this many times, but it's important to kind of, ground us back into a level playing field here. Two broad programmatic areas. They're actually interlinked, cures and improving life or treatments here. In cures, our priorities include cell replacement therapies for a functional cure and insulin independence, and certainly efforts to modify the course of the disease, slow down, halt, or reverse, ideally, through immunotherapeutic or beta cell protective and regenerative therapies, combinations, so on and so forth. And of course, our priority in universal screening, because we need to identify who's at risk and then have interventions in them. And in improving lives, we continue to support the development of devices, drugs, behavioral interventions. But now with so many advances that I'll talk to you about, how can we get the next generation of devices to be less intrusive? How can we fully close the loop? How can we improve not just glucose control, but metabolic control? There are no therapies for complications being developed for type 1 diabetes specifically. And how can we change that? What role can we play here? And then this is a disease that comes with 24/7, 365 mental health, so much math to do, so many other activities to balance out. And there is a huge mental health burden, psychosocial burden. And how can we relieve that so people with T1D don't have to think about their T1D and they can go about their lives? So all of these are priority areas that my colleagues have presented through the course of the fiscal year, and I will highlight a few. The first one, I have to include this one here. This was not core within the research portfolio here. However, this has been probably a crown jewel in amongst our many achievements that we will be talking about in the past. We talked about in the past and will be talking about in forward-looking, is the T1D index. This was an initiative led by JDRF, mostly our Global Access Group team here, but many others were involved, including many volunteers that were involved here, and many people outside of the JDRF as important stakeholders. It's a first ever comprehensive picture of what type 1 diabetes looks like. What is the prevalence? What is the rate at which it's increasing across the globe? Close to 200 countries, there's data here. This is a very important starting point to begin those conversations with different governments, with different stakeholders around the globe here, and positions us to become a global leader in type 1 diabetes here. It's inspiring, it's full of data, and most importantly, it's a living, breathing document. It's not a one and done effort. It's a living, breathing document that will be updated as more and more data come out here. And you know, it's going to improve our tiers of care from bringing people from where they are today to the next higher level of care. There may be no care in some parts of the world, and how can we bring them to minimal care, which is basically insulin and glucose strips? If they are in minimal care, how can we take them to the next tier of moderate or medium care? And if they're there, how can we take them to the top tier of care, where they will be able to avail closed loop systems, cures, you know, and so on and so forth here. And so there is an intentional effort in doing this the way we are talking about it, because this positions us not just as a leader, but allows us to have those conversations and customize it to the geopolitical and socio-economic situation of each country and what can be feasible there. We can't go into every country saying we're going to do a cell replacement therapy. It ain't going to happen. And so how can we still improve the lives with the data we have in hand here? So there's more to come on this, and the right group will be presenting this at some point in time to the RIVs in the future. Let's get into some of our core strategies here. Now, again, we can't talk enough about cell replacement therapy. It's very difficult to highlight only one or two progress, because there's been so much here. But you know, having to pick, we have to say about Vertex. You have seen many announcements about Vertex's first cell therapy trial using what we call naked islet implantation with full immunosuppression, the VX880 product with their stem cell derived beta cell that was originally developed by Doug Melton. And then, of course, it went through multiple iterations, and they demonstrated very impressive results, including one individual being insulin-free for over a year and a half, and the others also doing well. And they are going to be presenting more data at the upcoming American Diabetes Association meeting at the end of June, so in about a month and a half or so. And then most recently, they announced the launch of their second clinical trial using the same cells, but now encapsulated in what's called VX264 here. And this will not require immunosuppression. They've launched this particular trial in the US, Canada, and hopefully will be expanding further out in other geographies there. So a lot of excitement there, and they've acquired Biocide, the other giant that we have been funding for over a decade now. And so we think 1 + 1 is more than 2 here, and we are anxious to see where they're moving forward, because Biocide, remember, is also doing the clinical trial with their gene-edited cells. So a lot more going on in the area of cell replacement therapies, and I have time to just talk about one of them, and so this is the one we mentioned here. But there was another excitement, earlier stage development here. So Aspect Biosciences is a Vancouver-based small biotech company that has a proprietary 3D bioprinting technology. So now you use 3D printing to not print like a castle or some other structure, but now you actually bioprint tissue architecture, in this case, pancreatic architecture. It could be any organ tissue. It's being increasingly used in many diseases with end organ failure, and such as in type 1 diabetes and other diseases. And JDRF funded Aspect Biosciences through our IDDP program, brought them into the cell therapy consortium here, introduced them to multiple collaborators, including Novo Nordisk, and the dialogue began there. And what happened, it was very exciting to hear very recently that Novo Nordisk actually partnered up with Aspect. Novo has developed proprietary cells, stem cell derived beta cells there, and now they've entered into a partnership with Aspect, quite a large partnership, promising to develop 4 different therapies in using their bioprinting technology, the first of which is actually going to be for type 1 diabetes. But they also have type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other metabolic diseases on their target. So we anticipate hearing more about their progress in the coming years there. But this was a big win for the field. Now to see a giant such as Novo Nordisk invest even further in type 1 diabetes research. And this is exactly what we want to happen. This is exactly what JDRF has been trying to do and kind of redesign the ecosystem around a T1D priority here. Let's get to the next area. Oh, this, now there's, how much more can I talk about this? So TZIL, the teplizumab, the monoclonal antibody against CD3, which is part of a T-cell antigen there, that has shown a tremendous level of effectiveness over the last 30 years in preclinical and clinical studies. And then it was acquired by Provention Bio and taken forward. And you all know TZIL is the first disease-modifying therapy approved by showing delaying type 1 diabetes onset or stage 3 disease by 3 years in individuals that were considered stage 2, that had 2 or more autoantibodies and had failed a glucose tolerance test or were dysglycemic here. What's exciting actually is now TZIL is being given to people in stage 2 diabetes across the United States of America. And hopefully they'll have approval in other geographies, and we'll see this drug affecting people's lives in a positive way around the world here. But that's not where it stops here. We have multiple disease-modifying therapies in various stages of clinical development. I'll speak about only one of them now in the next slide. But the point is, TZIL is also being tested for stage 3 by Provention Bio. And as you know, most recently, they got acquired by Sanofi. So here's another giant who is in this field that is shown in this slide here, is now investing and committed to developing therapies for type 1 diabetes. This is a situation exactly where we want to be, where we are in the device space or were in the device space about 5-6 years ago. Now we're beginning to see that happen in the cure space, and we want to see more and more of this coming, other commercial developers coming into and investing and committing in type 1 diabetes here. This is the other DMT that was presented to this RIV group, I believe in the month of February, I don't remember. So this is a clever trial, quite cleverly named, as you've heard before, which stands for closed loop and verapamil here. So the trial was actually designed to test 2 interventions, either standalone or in combination, to see if they can preserve the insulin-producing capacity or measured through C-peptide in people newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This was an aggressive design. Within 1 month of diagnosis, the entire recruitment happened during the peak of the pandemic, and they still accomplished doing that. This was the level of engagement by the families and the clinicians involved in it. So we applaud that just at face value. And then the results were amazing too. What's shown in the bottom right corner is verapamil, the blood pressure lowering drug, in purple, and with matching with comparator placebo which is without the drug in yellow there. And you see a separation where verapamil, the once a day oral pill that's inexpensive and is approved for blood pressure lowering across a very broad age group, starting with age 7, was able to preserve C-peptide compared to placebo by at least about 30% here. And what's shown in the top right corner is the intensive care, which is in red, versus standard care, which is in blue. Intensive care is hybrid closed loop systems. You could use any system. In this trial, they used the Medtronic 670G and the Tandem Control IQ because Omnipod 5, Horizon 5 wasn't available at this point in time here. And tight glucose control was not able to preserve beta cell function here. It provided very good glucose control, as is shown here on the left side in the text there, that it did provide very good glucose control, but not preserve beta cell. We don't know, we know from a lot of studies over the last 30 years that if you have good glucose control, you do get long-term benefits. So it's possible that we may see some long-term benefits of the good glucose control with respect to beta cell function, but it wasn't evident in this 1-year intervention trial here. There's a lot of discussions going on right now, what we do with verapamil. It's very interesting. It's not exhaustive. And there's a lot we can do. One is we are funding the study further to follow these people for 3 more years to see if there's a legacy effect, if this effect lasts when you're taking off treatment, verapamil treatment. We are combining verapamil with other treatments such as teplizumab and others to come, and see if you can get a greater effect with the combination of this beta cell preserving agent along with an immunotherapy, for example, so on and so forth. We're also considering whether verapamil can now be tested in stage 2 diabetes, where you have an active immune system, you're losing some beta cells, hence you're dysglycemic, but you haven't lost all of the beta cells. Can it be given in stage 2 so that you preserve the beta cell function and like teplizumab, delay the onset of insulin dependence? TBD, we'll come back to you when we have more results. And this is the very exciting recent trial that we just launched here, so we will not have results for a while. So Diomed Medical is a Swedish biotech company that has been testing a particular multiple therapies, but one for T1D is an antigen-specific immunotherapy approach. A lot of the approaches that we take, or most of them, are not antigen-specific. They're very effective, like teplizumab, like golimumab that you've heard about, the TNF-alpha, and like many other treatments, JAK inhibitors, so on and so forth. This one, as you know, one of the autoantibodies used for detecting T1D is GAD65, antibody to GAD65 protein in the blood for determining whether a person is at risk, along with other autoantibodies. What this company has done is they've figured a clever way of delivering small amounts of the GAD protein, GAD65 protein here, and therefore it's called an antigen-specific immunotherapy approach. I have linked a video here, which I won't spend time on showing the video on this call, but the link is to the bottom right, and the video is here in the slides that Brian will share with you all. You're welcome to go and see exactly how this therapy is delivered in the person with type 1 diabetes, in stage 3 type 1 diabetes, so newly diagnosed, and how it is expected to work here. So what JDRF has partnered with Diomed Medical is in a phase 3 pivotal trial called Diagnode-3. The previous trials were obviously Diagnode-2 and Diagnode-1. That's a no-brainer. In newly diagnosed individuals, and try and in adults with type newly diagnosed, to see whether this therapy works here. This is going to be conducted in over 50 sites in Europe and USA. So more to come, and we need your support to be speaking about this so that people enroll and we get the trial completed as soon as possible. In phase 2 trials, it was demonstrated that this particular therapy is effective in preserving C-peptide, but effective in a subset of people with type 1 diabetes that had a specific genotype or genetic makeup, as well as had the GAD65 autoantibody there. Now, that percentage or that subset of T1D is actually as high as 40% when you take them having that particular genetic makeup and a GAD65 autoantibody here. So it's not a small number. So even if 40% of people can benefit from this therapy, that's a huge win. So a lot of excitement. As I said, we won't have time to cover everything, and I do want to give my colleagues in the policy department to also come and advocacy department to speak a little bit to it. So let me jump on to improving lives, which is another important area where treatments are so required today to help people with type 1 diabetes here. And what more can I say about a thriving device marketplace here? More and better CGMs getting approved, more and better systems, hybrid closed loop systems getting approved. And you will see in the next slide, more and better algorithms getting approved here. So here are just some examples. 780G got approved last month. That's great. It comes several years after European approval, but we'll take it because we have other options. We certainly have better CGMs now. G7, I saw a prototype here from one of my colleagues in the research, in the national office here. It's amazing. I was so impressed by it. Now, I don't use a CGM, but I was very impressed by this one, by the form factor of this particular CGM. And then, Abbott's Freestyle Libre 3 got approved here. It was approved outside the US a while back. And then, of course, all these devices are getting approved in younger and younger age groups, including the latest, which is the Omnipod 5 here. A very good position. People have now choice to hopefully pick the one that works best for their lifestyle. Now, about tide pool loop. Many of you have heard about this, the not-for-profit in the Bay Area that JDRF and Hempstead Charitable Trust has been supporting for a long time. We were very impressed by the algorithm there and by the team that was working on it, the committed team there. And lo and behold, it took a while, but lo and behold, tide pool's algorithm for hybrid closed loop called Loop got approved by the FDA a couple months ago. That's an amazing victory because it's the first truly interoperable algorithm to get approved. And interoperability has been an area that JDRF has prioritized for a long time here in open protocol artificial pancreas systems. We want people with diabetes to have true choice of the pump they want to use, the CGM they want to use, and probably most importantly, the algorithm that works best for them. And FDA has been a great partner in making these pathways available and easy for people to follow. JDRF will continue to work and push here. Tidepool's next steps are now to find a partner, because what has been happening is the Loop algorithm has been quite well adopted, but it's mostly by the DIY community. And we wanted to change that, and we have been successful in getting this one approved. But now Tidepool needs, and I'm hoping that they will be able to announce partnership or partnerships with multiple pump companies that will adopt or will incorporate the Loop algorithm there, and then people will truly have choice. So we're looking forward to that day, which is probably coming up soon. We also have been a big advocate for adjunctive therapies. You know, this insulin is a lifeline for people with type 1 diabetes. It's certainly saving lives. We need better insulins. We need designer insulins like glucose-responsive insulins, liver-targeted insulins, ultra-fast-acting insulins, and we're working on all of those. But one thing we have strongly championed is, you know, we often forget the entire picture when we just consider insulin. So this insulin-centric monotherapy view of treating diabetes for 100 years has actually hurt us. When the disease, the pathogenesis of the disease is changing quite rapidly, you know the rampant overweightedness and obesity of people with, all people, and people with T1D are not spared. You know that people are not meeting their glucose, their ADA recommended hemoglobin A1C levels. You know there are a lot of shortcomings, and people with diabetes are still getting complications. And the lifespan of people with diabetes, while better than before, is still a good 10 years or so lesser than a person without diabetes. But you also know, and I've heard from many of my colleagues and myself and others, that unfortunately, the pharmaceutical company industry is not developing any treatments for kidney and heart disease and type 1 diabetes. In fact, that's an exclusion criteria in their clinical trials. So we have a huge responsibility to be filling that gap. And we are probably not just the major funder, probably the only funder pushing this forward with some funding from the NIH. And so how can we overcome this hurdle? So this particular fiscal year, and this was presented in the March RIV or April RIV, and you can go back and check please check the presentation. We have funded multiple clinical studies of novel as well as repurposed therapies for both diabetic kidney disease and diabetic heart disease in people with type 1 diabetes. I will highlight one particular study because again, in the interest of time here, is using sotagliflozin, which is a dual SGLT1/2 inhibitor in a pivotal trial for heart failure in people with type 1 diabetes. It's being conducted in the United Kingdom in multiple sites there to ensure the trial completes in time here. And that would be amazing if the results pan out, because then the company, Lexicon Pharmaceuticals, may take this forward to the regulators for approval there. And then we'll have a therapy for heart failure for T1D. And likewise, we hope to emulate this with other drugs in the heart failure space, but also in the kidney, in kidney function space. And we are pursuing many of these agents here. So more to come when we have results. We just launched these trials, so we will not have results for another 2 or 3 years, but I think it's worth the wait. And then finally, talking about progress over the last year, you know, our psychosocial program is fairly new compared to some of our other programmatic areas. but the progress there has been amazing. So we have many priorities that has been presented by my colleague in the last RIV meeting. So I won't belabor those things, but in terms of our progress in FY23 here, we are funding, as you can see, you can count there, about 7 or 8 major clinical tests, the clinical trials, testing behavioral and behavioral interventions here that can improve the quality of life of people. And they not only do better with their mental health, but also do better with their clinical outcomes, such as A1C, time in range, so on and so forth. And these span across many of the critical areas that affect people with diabetes, with type 1 diabetes, such as distress, depression, anxiety, disordered eating. And we have many projects that actually look into more than one of these in the same trial here. And throughout, which I didn't mention throughout, in almost all our studies, we're mandating in the inclusion criteria of a very diverse population to be included in the trials. So it's more representative of the real world situation here. We're encouraging investigators to go out and about to ensure that they are being as inclusive in their trials for representation, so that we actually get real world data when it comes out, when the trial results read out, and they work for all people with type 1 diabetes. So that's an important underlying theme that I didn't mention earlier here. So good segue here. Clinical trials here, a moment of pride. My colleague Brian calls it golden age for trials. I call it a moment of pride, pride here for JDRF. Many, many trials. I won't read the numbers. You can read it there. And when I joined JDRF more than a decade ago, I could count the number of trials with just the fingers on my hands here. And now look at the number of trials we're supporting. We know that, supporting a trial does not necessarily mean everything is going to work. And that's why we need to be doing so many. Trials take time. Trials cost money. Trials require a lot of commitment from the families, from the investigators, from the funders, regulators, manufacturers, so on and so forth. We're pushing on all cylinders here. And hopefully when the trials read out for the ones that are successful, as I showed you in the pipeline slide, we can take them through the next chevrons of the pipeline, regulatory approval, reimbursement, so on and so forth. And repeat the cycle again, as I mentioned earlier there. And so this is a teaser into what's coming here. It's not just the numbers that I showed you in the previous slide. These are actual trials. Again, I want to emphasize this is not an exhaustive list. These were just some that we have cherry-picked here. Top in blue is improving lives. Bottom in black is for cures. So soon to start exciting trials is on the left side. VTV is developing this glucokinase activator that we've presented to you before to provide better glucose control, hopefully reduce even hypoglycemia. They're launching their phase 3 trial. We recently funded denosumab, a trial in City of Hope, and we talked about the ViaCyte trial that launched recently. And then there's some trials that we have funded that are underway now. I've talked about the complications of the psychosocial trials, and I've also spoken to you about the verapamil combination trials, and that's what VeraT1D Plus is. And I spoke about Diamid and VX264. Other trials that are about to read out, I'm going to say in the next 12 to 14 to 18 months or so, is in the improving lives area. We have multiple adjunctive therapies now in combinations that are going to be reading out very, very soon. And then a whole bunch of disease-modifying therapy and cell therapy trials. We've spoken a lot about the JAK inhibitor trial called Bandit being done in Australia. DIVID is a trial being done in Finland, testing 2 antiviral medications in newly diagnosed individuals. And ustekinumab is a drug that's approved for RA and rheumatoid arthritis, sorry. It's a dual immunotherapy combined together for IL-12 and IL-23, and that's being tested in adults, the T1D2 study, and kids, the K1D study there. So a lot more to read out. Many will read out, and we will come to you, in real time and update you on this. Please be on the lookout for our insider news, press releases, blogs as we speak about these trial results when they're coming out here. And please foster a culture of clinical trial participation. I've mentioned this to you a few minutes ago. It's very, very important that you all are engaged. You impress upon the families the value of participating in clinical trials, not only for them, but also to move our mission forward faster and in a more and probably in some ways cheaper if we can do them in a short amount of time here. So this is very, very critical. Probably one of the biggest donations a person can make is by participating in a clinical trial here. And so I thank this group for being champions, but I'm hoping that you'll keep up the momentum as much as you can in the coming years there. Now it's my privilege to transfer it over to my esteemed colleague from the Grassroots Advocacy group here, Laura Whitton, who I have worked with for many, many years here. So Laura, take it away.
Hi, I'm Laura Whitton, Vice President of Government Relations and Grassroots Advocacy for JDRF. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about what we're up to in advocacy in terms of driving research progress. So a key priority for us right now is the renewal of the Special Diabetes Program. And just to refresh your memory a little bit, this is a program that started with bipartisan beginnings back in 1997. And it's been going strong ever since. It's a federal program that complements the work that JDRF funds. And there's a sister part of the program, the Special Diabetes Program for Indians, which funds type 2 diabetes treatment and prevention for the American Indian and Alaska Native communities. So we work with the tribes to renew these programs together. We were very fortunate back in 2020 when Congress renewed the program for 3 years at $150 million per year for each program. The challenge we have before us now is that the Special Diabetes Program and SDPI, they are up for renewal by the end of this September. So their renewal is a very key priority for us. And JDRF is a driver of every single renewal. We do have other partners that we work with, but it's really up to us to get this done. So some of the progress that we've had this year in terms of building this support as we go forward to this deadline in September, we were able to work with our champions in the House, Congresswoman Diana DeGette and Congressman Gus Bilirakis, to introduce legislation that would renew the Special Diabetes Program for 5 years at $150 million. And there's another bill also that would renew the SDPI for the same duration and same dollar amount. So we work, both of these programs move together. So yeah, we're just working collectively to try to make that happen in the next couple of months. There's an SDP and SDP-on sign-on letter that is live right now in the House. And what we're trying to do is demonstrate strong bipartisan support, ongoing strong support for the programs to help as leaders need to make difficult decisions as to how to allocate funds. We've been very successful in this letter in the past. The last renewal, we had 378 representatives sign on. So we're hoping to meet or exceed that this year. And in the Senate, we just closed out the Senate letter that was led by Senators Susan Collins and Jeanne Shaheen, our Diabetes Caucus co-chairs in the Senate. And with that, we had a very nice bipartisan mix of 60 senators that signed on to those letters. So please, be in touch with, keep checking your inboxes. We have action alerts ongoing. Please make sure you're notifying family, friends, and sharing this with the community because it's really going to be a collective effort to renew the SDP as we head into this next fiscal year. And then insulin affordability. This is another one. We've been working on this for quite some time, as you know. And we had some great progress this in August, where legislation was enacted that caps the cost of insulin at $35 per month for those on Medicare. The commercial copay cap that we were hoping to get was not able to move through the Senate. So that's something we are working on now. The legislation also caps the cost of all prescription drugs at $2,000 per year for those on Medicare Part D. It removes insulin from the annual deductible for Medicare and for some commercial plans. And it also extends ACA premium subsidies through 2005 for those that need to access insurance on the marketplace. So all of this was tremendous progress because of our advocates just really leading the charge to get Congress to address this crisis. And with all of the work that we've been doing, it's been nice because, you know, the pressure is prompting action in this space. And you may have heard from a number of the manufacturers that they have taken steps to reduce the cost of their insulins. Some of those reductions include monthly caps, reductions in list prices, and other reductions. This is all great progress, but the challenge we have is that things can change on a moment's notice. So, you know, that's why we need to keep working on this issue and have legislation enacted. And other great progress. So Civica, you know, JDRF has a partnership, is a partner with Civica. They will be selling 3 biosimilar insulins. And California recently announced that it has selected Civica to manufacture those insulins. So that'll be starting in 2024. And so, as I mentioned, we need Congress to act on insulin. We've been working with our key champions here, Senator Susan Collins and Jeanne Shaheen, one Republican, one Democrat, a great bipartisan mix, to introduce legislation. And that was recently done, and it's called the Insulin Act. And what this legislation does is it gets at the commercial copay cap for people that need insulin. It also mandates that pharmacy benefit managers pass 100% of the insulin rebates or discounts onto health plans. And it's also looking to promote competition in the generic and biosimilar insulin spaces through a regulatory pathway, and some reporting requirements and things of that nature. So we are working with our champions right now to try to navigate this through the Senate. And what this will do is build upon the progress to date. So a lot of great things have happened this year. Our advocates are doing a tremendous job of building support. So it sets us up nicely as we head into FY24 to continue driving progress forward. If you have any questions or need additional information, please reach out to advocacy@jdrf.org and we'd be happy to help. Thank you.